Hello and welcome to another edition of Turn Out a Punk. I'm your host, Damian Abraham. Once again, I'm bringing you a conversation with someone who grew up listening to punk, may or may not still be involved with punk, but had their life changed by the genre in a major way. And today on the show, huge guest from the legends Echo and the Bunnymen, and also the author of the brand new book, Bunnyman, Will Sargent, is here on the show. And get ready. This one is a doozy. It's a real fun conversation. More on that in 1 second, though. But first, if you want to get in touch with me, head over to the email address, turnedoutapunkpodcast@gmail.com. That is run by my brother and show producer and guest booker extraordinaire. But this one's got an interesting story. I'll get to that in a second. And he will get the message to me. I love you, Tristan. Thank you for all the hard work you do. You can also find me on Twitter and Instagram at Left4Damian. If you want to support the show, the best way to support the show is just by telling all your friends about it. You can also subscribe to it and rate it on iTunes. And thank you to everyone that does do that. And you can also head over to patreon.com/turnedoutapunk and check out some of the fun stuff we do over there. And thank you to all the people that do that, because it really does help keep this show going. Like when stuff breaks down, you know, and you got to repair it, which has happened really recently. That really helps. So thank you to everyone on Patreon for helping me do that. And speaking of help, this thing would not be possible without the help of the fine folks at Vans, who came aboard a few years ago and said, Damian, do what you do. Just don't do it out of your own pocket. And they helped me cover the costs of doing the show each and every week, which there are costs. Who it's free, but there are costs to make it. It's one of those great ironies in life. But anyway, thank you to them for doing that. And check out Channel 66, the Vans channel, YouTube channel right now, video channel. It's got a lot of former guests of the show, friends of the show, future guests of the show, hint, hint, DJing, interviewing people, hanging out. It's really fun, some of the stuff you're doing. If you like this show, you'll like the stuff that's going on over there. And speaking of liking stuff, you might like the new Fucked Up song. It's 90 minutes, so bear that in mind. It's called Year of the Horse, and now it is available for all your streaming pleasure on all those streaming services. And it'll be coming out in a physical form on Tank Crimes Records later on this year. And there's going to be a lot of other fucked up stuff coming up soon, too. I'll be talking about that, probably. Yeah, probably will be talking about it. Why not? All right. Why not get on with the show? On the show today, Will Sargent is here. And if you are not familiar with Will Sargent, he is a music legend, a guitar player in Echo and the Bunnymen, done some solo work, done a lot of other different projects over the years as well. And this thing came about because friend of the show, Toronto guitar legend in her own right, Alison Baker, now does not live in Toronto, but Alison Baker hit me up and was like, would you want Will Sargent from Echo and the Bunnymen to come on the show? And I said, yes, that would be amazing. And so, you know, lo and behold, here we are. And Will is on the show. And Will has got a brand new book, which is just available for pre-order right now, called Bunnyman. And this thing, I have not read it yet, because I haven't had a chance to read this thing. This interview came together before, I think the book even was, the book was announced, but it hadn't come out yet. So will be back, spoiler, for a part 2 after I have a chance to read this book, and we can dive into more stuff. But oh man, this is a fun conversation. I'm excited for you to hear this. I'm not going to ramble on anymore. I don't think I have any notes this week or anything, but yeah, I don't think there's any notes. So sit back, relax, and enjoy Will Sargent on Turned Out a Punk. Will, thank you so much for coming on the show.
No problem.
Well, I spared you from this off air, but I'm very excited to talk to you. Not only because am I a huge fan of your band, but I am fascinated by this early Liverpool punk scene, which I think is greatly underappreciated outside of the people that experienced it.
Well, yeah, it is. You know, it's. I heard you talking to Steve Diggle, and he was mentioning about, you know, the Free Trade All Pistols show and everything. Well, the Pistols played in Liverpool before that.
Really? I didn't know that was before. What was when did they play Liverpool the first time?
They played at the. I wasn't there. Gotta say, I wasn't there, but Mac was there, and it was before. It was even before Eric's, which was like the punk club in Liverpool, was called Eric's. It was called the Revolution Club.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and then they changed its name to Eric's, and it sort of, as all them punk bands started appearing, I only started going in sort of April 77, something like that. So I was a little bit late onto it, but it started in 76 in as the Revolution Club. I think the first band on was the Runaways, I think, and the Stranglers and Pistols. I didn't start going till a bit later on, but it wasn't open every week at that time. It was only open now and then. It wasn't every week.
Well, I cannot wait to get to this stuff because you're schooling me already. But I got to start this off the way they all start off, which is, Will, how did you get into punk? Do you remember the first time you ever came across the genre?
Yeah, it was at a Dr. Feelgood gig, and they played Anarchy in the UK over the PA.
That's awesome.
And I remember thinking, wow, this is great. What is it? And they played it twice. They played it before the band, during the sort of bit between the support band. I can't remember who was supporting. And then after, when everyone's going out, and I was thinking, that's amazing. And I didn't really know until a lot later on when I heard it again, once like all the Bill Grundy stuff was going on and all that,
Mm-hmm.
And it was Filth and the Fury on the newspaper and, all that sort of malarkey. So it was kind of, and then I recognized it. Oh, that's that track that I heard. It was just so different to anything else that was around at the time, Even like the likes of the Stooges weren't up to that sort of the impact of that sort of forced on you.
Yeah, absolutely. But like even being at a Dr. Feelgood show, you're kind of at the stuff that is, at least from my mind, looking from a historical distance, is the precursor to the Sex Pistols in a very direct way.
Yeah, totally. Like, there's a lot of bands. There's like, there was like a bridge between sort of the old school 70s prog rocky stuff and then going into like this whole new thing. And there was like a lot of bands that sort of got left on the wayside, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I suppose it started with like the likes of, I don't know, Roxy Music, Bebop Deluxe. They were kind of like a bridging band almost. They weren't punky, but they were kind of like taking it somewhere else, and they were like sort of short hair and all that sort of stuff. And somebody around that I know said that the beginning of punk was when they first saw Dr. Feelgood, and Wilco Johnson had his top button fastened. Called Pete Bentham, somebody from Liverpool, and I thought that was a really good way of putting it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Feelgood, sensational Alex Harvey band. That he was like basically doing that whole Johnny Rotten thing before Johnny Rotten.
Mm-hmm.
Sneering at the crowd and all the rest of it, and it was like a menacing character on stage, but it was like a character.
Yeah, 100%. Like I've always found it fascinating how, in America, the proto-punk stuff is very much defined. Like people talk about the Stooges and the MC5 and the Velvet Underground as being the precursors to punk, but it doesn't really get taken up in the same way. But like even like Status Quo and like bands like that, like there's what they're doing, that approach to kind of rock and roll is bringing it back in the same way that the Ramones would be doing a couple years later in America or a few years later.
Well, that's mad that you should say that, because I've got this book coming out, and I've said exactly that. Like, there's not a lot of difference between Status Quo and the Ramones, except that Status Quo wore flared Levi's, Ramones wore straights, 501s.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it's
not a lot of difference. And Status Quo was one of the first bands. Well, it was the first band that I went to see live.
Oh, amazing.
And it was amazing. It was around about that period of Dog of Two Heads, Pile Driver kind of period. That they did Paper Plane and all that stuff. And they were amazing live. They were like energy central, just fucking amazing. And but then, as time goes on, everybody gets older and they sort of mellow out or whatever, and they become like seen as a bit crap. But they weren't crap. They were brilliant.
Yeah. No, I like, you watch some footage from that time period, or you like, obviously those records, they hold up. Like that whole period, like that kind of hard glam period, once again, of English rock music is just, it's so good. And it's just so Like it is that spirit of like true rock and roll that punk really tries to capture later on.
Yeah. I think, New York Dolls obviously were heavily, influencing people over here as well.
Mm-hmm.
The Velvets, all that stuff.
So you said that was the first show you went to, Status Quo. Who else did they play with?
They were on with Slade.
Oh, amazing.
And Slade were amazing as well. They blew my mind. It was like, I was only like 12 or something. And it was in this place called the Stadium, Liverpool Boxing Stadium. They knocked it down, but it was like this amazing sort of 1930s Art Deco building. Can't believe they just bulldozed stuff like that down.
Yeah.
And I think it was a car park for years, just like a bit of waste ground kind of thing. Same with the Cavern, and the Cavern Club, they knocked that down. They had to build a fake one. So much demand for the cat. They wake up. Wait a minute, that band, the Beatles, weren't they quite popular? Hey, what are the? Yeah, right. Yeah, the Beatles. Yeah, they were popular in the '60s, weren't they? Well, they're still popular now. Where did they play? The Cavern. And we knocked it down. That was a good idea, wasn't it? Fucking morons.
That seems to be a thing with Liverpool. Like I remember even the first time I went there, in the year, I guess it was 2004, it had changed so radically by the time I went back there in like 2010, or going back there in 2010, 2012. Like it just seems like there's a lot of like knocking down old buildings that goes on in that city and sort of rebuilding on top of it.
Yeah. Well, Hitler did a fair amount of it as well.
That's true. Before that, I guess there's that kind of like, maybe it's from that, like that sort of mentality of needing to rebuild.
I don't know. It was an amazing, architecturally, it was one of the most amazing cities in the world before Adolf got his bombers on it,
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
What was the scene like in Liverpool as far as like local bands, or was there many sort of bands happening at that time?
When we started?
No, before that. I'm talking like even when you're going to these sort of Status Quo shows.
Oh, right. Well, there was this whole thing in Liverpool, the Liverpool Poets. It was there was a thing called the Liverpool Scene. That was the name of the band. And it was like a cross between sort of folk, jazz, rock, and poetry. Sounds a bit poncy now, but they were like radical, kind of anti-war hippies,
Yeah.
Bloke called Adrian Henry was in them, and and before that there was a band called the 23rd Turnoff, which did this amazing single called Michelangelo. Don't know if they've ever heard that.
No, I haven't heard that. I gotta check that out.
They were from Kirby, and they were kind of psychedelic, but they were a Merseybeat band first called the Kirby's, and but Merseybeat kind of died off or whatever, and they went a bit psychedelic. And I've forgot. I think they've only ever done one single. I'm not sure. A bloke called Jimmy Campbell was in them, he was a bit of a local hero around here,
With the Liverpool Scene bands, like, it sounds kind of like the Fugs or like the stuff that was going on ESP in New York. Like, is it kind of like yippie-ish? Like you mentioned, it was political.
Yeah, it's dead political. It was all anti-Vietnam and everything.
Mm-hmm.
They were kind of, like the poems were sort of political, but they were kind of funny as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there was an element of comedy in there. And my brother used to go and see them in Liverpool at the various places. There'd be nobody there, like half a dozen people or something. And it used to be a pub called O'Connor's, and all the heads used to go there in Liverpool, to score dope or whatever. And they were always hanging out there and doing shows there and poetry readings and stuff. I love all that stuff. I was too young for all that, but I wish I'd sort of, I wish I was a little bit older or could have seen some of that stuff.
What kind of music were these bands kind of playing with the comedy stuff that was interspersed with it? Was it like hard rock stuff, or is it, I guess, proto?
No, it was kind of some of it was kind of jazzy, like free-form jazz stuff, and then other bits would be folky, kind of acoustic guitars, and I can play you some if you want.
Oh no, I definitely, believe me, this is on my new playlist of stuff I gotta check out. That's why I love doing this show, is because I feel like right off the bat with that Sex Pistols thing, I feel like the history of rock and roll that we are given or that's kind of shown to us is very codified. It's very it's very mono in its presentation, and there's just so much richness to stuff that didn't maybe become huge hits internationally, especially.
Yeah, well, it was a totally underground scene, you know. It was a bit like, you know, like old Ginsberg and all them dudes when they came over and they played the Albert Hall. You know, you can imagine that, like it was poetry at the Albert Hall and it sold out.
That's amazing. Yeah. It's wild to think how much that stuff crossed over at that
Yeah.
time into like mainstream pop culture. Like it is very radical, very political, at times very confrontational stuff.
Yeah, and there was like a lot of underground press at the time as well, like, you know, International Times and Oz, these sorts of things. I don't know whether you've ever heard of them. They were kind of out of London, Ladbroke Grove area, and you know, people like what's his name? I can't remember his bloody name. He did a book called "Give the Anarchist a Cigarette." I can't remember what it's called now.
Oh yeah, what is this?
The Pink Fairies, I think, or was involved with the Pink Fairies.
McFerrin? Is it McFerrin?
Yeah, McFerrin.
Yeah. Oh man, that band is incredible. Did you ever see them?
Yeah.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
They came out to Liverpool, I guess. They must have toured.
Stadium. Saw them at the stadium.
Were they on by themselves or did they have support?
I can't remember if they had a support. Can't remember that, but I know it's one of the few gigs I actually left because it was they were just completely out of it. I was only young, you know, so I didn't have a lot to compare it to, you know, but it was they just didn't seem to be able to. They seemed to be all like out of their minds and couldn't play.
Yeah. Yeah. I could see that being a little weird to see as a kid.
Yeah. So me and my mate Davo, we just thought, oh, this is shit. Let's go. I did about 50 to get in.
Oh, that's amazing.
I love the records, you know, like, you know, Bunch of Sweeties and Never Neverland and, you know, Kings of Oblivion and all them. And they're quite heavy rock, aren't they, really? There's nothing that unusual about them. But, you know, Mick Farron was the Deviants, wasn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've got that. I've got a couple of their things. Patoof, I think, one of them.
Well, and it's also funny because like Mick Farron does, I think, a single on Stiff later on, but Twink from the band does so many amazing punk records, from like the Rings to the Twink solo record on Chiswick. Like really, they seem like a band that, once again, much in the way that we're talking about Status Quo, is like a definite bridge between the two scenes. Even the fact that they're on stage too fucked up to play is kind of like in the same way that punk tells people, like, yeah, you can get up on stage in any state and do this. Like it's almost the same sort of like free approach to rock and roll.
Yeah, you know, it was pretty radical.
Yeah.
And, like Twink, Twink was in Pretty Things, wasn't he, for a bit?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've spoke to Twink on the phone, I think, once, and I've got a record by him that he did with Bevis Frond. You ever heard of that?
No, I got to check that out. His catalog's incredible.
Yeah.
What's that kind of like?
Psychedelic, you know, kind of be psychedelia or whatever.
So is that the big scene in Liverpool at the time? Like, is it people that are into like sort of, you know, I mean, once again, we're talking pre-punk, but like sort of this like hairy freak beat hippie or post hippie kind of hard rock scene?
Yeah, it was a lot of hard rock kind of stuff, you know. Bad Company did their first gig at the stadium. I saw Robin Trower, AC/DC with Bon Scott.
Oh, awesome.
The rock music with Eno, all that stuff. You know, that was music was the only thing I was interested in.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
what did you make of bands like the Ramones and stuff when you started hearing, you know, and even like the Stooges and the New York Dolls? Like, were you hearing that stuff at the same time?
Yeah. My mate bought the Ramones LP. His name is Dave Mazenko, and he bought this Ramones LP ages before we'd heard of punk, you know, so he had the LP, the first one, and I don't know where he heard about it, but he you know, we used to just play it in his bedroom. It was all about going to each other's houses and playing records then, you know, that's what it was all about, or swapping records. We did a lot of bartering and trading records with each other. I'll give you sticky fingers, you give me shelter, or whatever.
Well, it's that limited means, right? Like it's everything costs money at this point, so you kind of have to rely on networks of people, and it really does help build scenes in that way.
Yeah, and I had like a paper round what I did in the morning and of an evening, so made a bit of money that way, and used to save me money and go and just buy records. That was it, or hi-fi equipment, or like cheapo hi-fi equipment at the time. It was all about that. It was all about buying record players, cassette players. Cassettes had just been invented a few years before.
Mm-hmm.
And we used to tape everything we had. Before that, we had the Mazenkos over the road. They had a Grundig reel to reel. And we used to tape, the top 40 and top of the pops and all that. But it was a lot of it. It was the bands like, when Quo were on doing In My Chair or whatever that we like. That's a great track if you know that one.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, they're once again like this band that
Tull, another one that we liked. Like Jethro Tull, to me, like everyone goes on about them being all like hairy fairy and all singing about fucking trolls, but they don't. They're all about like Ian Anderson's upbringing and problems and stuff. The songs are great, and they're not a million miles away from Beefheart.
Mm-hmm.
Some like that early stuff. Song for Jeffrey and all that. Could be a Beefheart track. So shut up about Tull and get into them. The first albums are brilliant. Benefit and Stand Up and all that.
And they're heavy. They're heavy as hell. Like those riffs are hard.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I saw them early doors as well. I didn't see him at the Stadium, but I did see him at the Empire in Liverpool.
So what were these shows like? Like what were the other people at these shows? Was it like a heavy scene where there were a lot of fights, or was it more just people like, doing a lot of drugs? Like what was the environment like?
I was a kid, so I didn't see it.
Yeah.
Like, nobody was doing drugs by me type of thing. But I think there was a lot of speed floating around back then.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was like a thing. You never used to smell weed so much like you do now. And in America it's everywhere, isn't it now? Because it's available. But it wasn't that violent. Well, the place used to get trashed. The Stadium had seats, and after gigs, the seats would be, they'd all be broken.
Yeah.
There's photos online if you want to look. Liverpool Stadium, the aftermath of some of the gigs, and the first front rows are all mashed. They're just knackered.
Wow, that's like it's something that's been come up on the show before. And once again, from experience of going there, from past guests that are from Liverpool, that is a really hard city, and it's the city where, famously the Cockney Rejects got beat up when they went and played. Discharge got beaten up when they went and played. Like it is a city that, it's amazing all the incredible art that comes out of it, because there's also, it is a hard city, and it's a tough town.
Yeah, I suppose so. I don't know. I don't think it is really.
I got beat up there, so maybe that's why I'm tainted by it.
Well, what happened, Malcolm? What happened?
It was that I'll edit this part out because I think people on the show have heard the story before because it's come up. But we were playing at the Liverpool Sound City show.
Just lately, then?
Yeah, it was about, I guess it was about like 5 years ago. And we were playing a show. This couple in the crowd started getting harassed by this group of, chavs, I guess, for lack of a better term. And I went down into the crowd in the middle of the band set, and the band keeps playing because I normally go into the crowd. And I, go over to this group of guys along with a lot of people in the audience, and I'm like, you guys should leave. And we tried to like phalanx them out, and they break the phalanx and come back and punch this couple in the face. And so at that point, I just try and fight them. And then all of a sudden I realize like I am completely overwhelmed by the number of people that are in this crew. And it only lasted about, 2 minutes, I'd say 3 minutes when they really got me down on the ground. But that's a good 3 minutes of them stomping on me. And I'm lucky I covered up and didn't lose consciousness. But, we finished the gig, but it definitely was one of the weirdest shows ever. The Flaming Lips were playing on the other stage at the same time, so I got this weird melange of my own band playing and the Flaming Lips bleeding together as I'm trying to cover up for being booted in the head.
Bloody hell.
So, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. It's honestly my favorite place in England to go. Like, I've got so many friends there, and that's the first place I ever played. And like obviously the Beatles and the Big Three and the Mersey Beat stuff. But like, as you're bringing up, the whole way through, it's such a rich cultural town. But it does have this reputation of being, a hard town. Like, once again, like from myself to Discharge, like people are getting stomped out.
Wow. Like, you do hear about it, but I've never encountered much of that, really. And I lived in town for, right in the centre for a while. And Soxton.
Where were you buying music? Like at this point, like when you're a younger kid, like what were the record stores you were going to?
There was one in Walton Vale, which is like on the way to Liverpool. And they used to sell records, but they also sold bicycles as well. It was a weird combination. There was a place called Nem's North End Music Store. Have you ever heard of that? That was owned by, what's his name? The manager of the Beatles. What's his bloody name?
Brian Epstein, is that it?
Yeah, his family owned this North End Music Store.
Did they have a label at some point that put out the Boy single or something?
Yeah, they put out records as well, like kind of pop records, I think.
Oh, excellent. Okay, yeah, no, I totally know that. What about Probe Records? Was that going?
Probe was started in like about early 70s, I think it started. And that was up in Clarence Street, which was right by where my flat used to be. But they'd moved by the time I had that flat. I did go there. I did buy Gong, Flying Teapot, Invisible Part 2. Or whatever. I bought that there. Was it Part 1? I don't know. Anyway, I did buy that there. It was almost like a little kiosk. It was a tiny, like, it became like a place selling sandwiches,
mm-hmm.
Like a little kiosk thing. Virgin started around about that time, around the early 70s, and they were on Bold Street. I think it was the third shop that Virgin had opened. 60 Bold Street, I think it was, which is in the centre of town,
Yeah.
Kind of like the hip street, if you like, a lot of shops, a lot of clothes shops, and it's full of restaurants now, thousands of them.
Was Probe Records more of a prog rock store?
Well, it was at the beginning, it was just, an outsider kind of thing, it was like when Virgin started, they were kind of like the cool label, what I mean? They were, they had Faust on it, and, Tubular Bells was a hippie record.
Yeah.
It was like, people forget about that that it was kind of like when Virgin started getting into all the sorts of punk stuff. I remember sort of thinking, they're just jumping in on the bandwagon, Yeah. And it put me off a bit, put me off the Pistols a bit, and it put me off, they seem to sign everybody. They had this sort of policy of sign everyone and someone might make it,
Mm-hmm.
One of these, don't put all your eggs in one basket kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. And also very much on trend too. It felt like when they signed the Sex Pistols, like it would have been, as you're saying, post that Bill Grundy episode, like they would have been sort of like the band du jour in the press. Like it would have been such an obvious move to sign them, I guess.
Yeah, they were going for like the controversial element. But the Virgin were an underground kind of thing at the beginning.
Mm-hmm. What about John Peel? Like, obviously you guys go on to do so many legendary sessions with him, but like, were you into some of because he was doing pirate radio stuff before that, right?
It was a bit before my time, and he was in America for a while, wasn't he? I think it was Dallas or somewhere. He was on a radio show over there. No, it was a little bit before my time, I think. I never used to listen to. I only started listening to John Peel when the punk stuff kind of started happening. But we used to listen to it religiously, like every night he was on, and record all the shows and then play them a constantly in the van going to gigs, you know.
Yeah, he had such an amazing ear, or like, obviously other people helping him too, in terms of producers, but just like the stuff that they were doing on that show right up until the end, it was always like really interesting, kind of not necessarily mainstream stuff, never mainstream stuff. Like it was always just stuff that he found interesting, it seems.
Well, that's the first time I had The Residents was on John Peel's show. And it was, Meet the Residents, that album. He played about 10 minutes of that because it's not really, it's kind of the first bit is sort of cover versions, if you like. They do were made for walking, but you wouldn't recognize it really,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you end up doing records for him, right? Or Cordova Records does Residence Records at some point. Were you guys A&Ring that label?
No, I heard you talking to somebody, and they were going on about record labels pretending to be indies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of what was going on. It was basically, our deal was with Warner, WEA, Warner Electra Asylum. I think they were WEA Records, but they wanted to appear hip. So they invented this Cordova Records, which we went along with. We liked the idea, But not because it was like a fake label, but we liked the idea of being called Cordova because we loved Clockwork Orange,
It's also like what a great label. Like go back and look at that, when you go back and look at that catalog, like there's a lot of, obviously yourselves and so many classic records, but there's, The Residents, The Sound, Teardrop Explodes, I think at some points on there too, right? Like they
were on Phonogram or Polydor, one of them.
Okay, sorry. Dalek, I Love You, I believe, is on there. There's just like a real experimental, cool cross section of bands.
Yeah.
How did Echo and the Bunnymen come together?
It was kind of, obviously with punk, everybody was starting bands, weren't they? It was like all of a sudden you didn't have to be Jan Ackerman to be in a band,
Mm-hmm.
Know a couple of chords and have a bit of an attitude, and throw it down, and that was it. Simple. So it was kind of a thing that just everybody was doing, and it wasn't like something I was thinking, oh, I know, I'm going to start a band. We're going to sell loads of records. I wasn't interested. Still not interested now. Selling loads of records, it's not. It was never about that. It was just about being creative. It was a creative urge that there was no stopping, really. And I didn't even. It just sort of fell into place. It wasn't like a plan. Steve Diggle was saying the same thing, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He was saying that it all just fell into place, and you didn't think about it that much. It was just like, I know, let's start a band. But so what happened? Basically, what happened was, I'd bought a drum machine. I had a crappy guitar, and I was making tapes and stuff at home, just like thrashing away and learning how to play the guitar. I was 20, something like that, and might have even been 19 when I sort of started. But I swapped a pair of plastic punk pants with a mate of mine called Paul Simpson. He was in a band called the Wild Swans, but he was in Teardrop Explodes then. So I got this crappy K guitar. It was like, I didn't know how to tune it, didn't know anything about guitars. So I bought a little booklet that had all the shapes of where you put your fingers, like dots on the strings where you put your fingers. And I just started playing from one shape to the next, just trying to get dexterous with your fingers, And I got to the point where I was making like these weird little tapes, and a lot of them are just noise. I've got some of them downstairs. I played one yesterday, and it was difficult to listen to. A lot of, like, some of the sounds was getting out of it. I was like, how the fucking hell have I made that sound? It sounded like somebody in a blender or something. And it was just nuts. And so I just sort of, I don't know, I suppose I must have thought at some point, I want to be in a band. But I can't remember that sort of light bulb moment or anything. And I went to this party it was all the people from Eric's. It was a party in a place called Kirkland's. And I'd seen Mac in Eric's, didn't really know him, you know, and he was sat on his own. But he was the only person there that I kind of vaguely knew. So I just, you know, went up to him and said, "Oh, all right, what were you waiting for, or what are you waiting for?" And he said, "I'm waiting for the gift of vision." And I thought that was really cool, because it's off Sound and Vision by David Bowie.
Yeah.
And I just sort of thought, well, someone had mentioned that he could sing, and he'd been thrown out of Teardrop Explodes a couple of weeks before for, basically not turning up to rehearsals, even though the rehearsals were in his flat. Just stayed in bed. Amazing. Dedication to idleness beyond the call of duty there. And so I just said, fancy coming around to our house, and dick around with guitars and see what happens, And he did. He turned up eventually, and he brought his acoustic, and we used to just fuck about with guitars. Then I got a Telecaster from Rushworth's in Liverpool, which was a big music shop, on like, weekly payments. And I bought a drum machine, and then we just started arsing around with this drum machine. The drum machine really helped because it meant you kept in time. So we were really good at being in time,
Yeah. Where did the influence for that noise stuff that you're doing? I guess, is that the stuff that winds up on Weird as Fish?
Yeah, sort of that, and it was actually worse than that. Possible. So I don't know. I liked Eno. I bought Metal Machine music on import when it came out. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I just used to think making noises and stuff was art or something. I don't know.
Because the only bands I can think of also that are using drum machines at that time, like, it's not, a very common instrument, but like, your Metal Urbain and incredible band, absolutely phenomenal band. And yourselves, like, it's really like, is that, once again, is that an influence on you to do that, or where's that influence to use a drum machine coming from?
Well, it was mainly from Eno, but I did have the Metal Urbain record, what was it called? Hysteric, something or other.
Panic?
Fascista! That one.
Yes. That's the first record on Rough Trade too. It's like it's such an important single.
Yeah, I've got that, and I've got like a compilation album. But I like that, but I also like Suicide.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I should have mentioned them.
Like Suicide at the time, but they were like, everybody in Liverpool loved them. I don't know, they got bottled off in places. Like, you'd hear about these gigs where Suicide got bottled off in Paris or whatever it was. It's like, what? They were gods in Liverpool.
I think weren't they booked to like opening for someone really weird too? Like, were they opening for not Sham 69, but someone like really weird when they got bottled off, maybe? But maybe,
yeah. I know when they played Eric's, they were supporting. I can never remember who it was. It was either Devo or Pere Ubu.
What a bill! Holy! Yeah. Were you into Pere Ubu at all?
I love them. They're one of my favorite bands.
Yeah.
I love all that stuff. Like, I like punk, and I like the energy of punk and all that. But I like it didn't last long. It was about a year before everything started changing. Like, Wire did 154, which you can't call punk.
Well, that's interesting you bring up, because like, to me, I do call it punk. Like, I kind of view everything that kind of like comes out of this thing as being part of this diaspora. But like, do you feel it's much more defined than that?
I just think it had expanded. It's like, punk really was thrashing away and, a bit of angry shouting. Mm-hmm. And then it sort of changed. It started getting, like, it still had the sort of essence, but it was, I don't know. I don't think you could call 154, but I think it's more like early Pink Floyd than anything else, or prog rock or something.
Yeah.
And Pere Ubu were like experimental. They were before punk anyway. They sort of drifted into punk, didn't they? Because they were like, I suppose they didn't have anywhere to pigeon. Everyone likes to pigeonhole everything. So, where did they go? Pere Ubu, they looked a bit weird. They looked like, they'd come from the set of a David Lynch film or something.
Yeah.
And they were amazing. They were amazing. Like, I loved them so much. Pair of that modern dance LP.
Oh, incredible! Like a godly record. Like and like I think they're punk because what else are they? You know, in the same way that like you're bringing up the Residents. Like obviously, never really sonically a punk band, but they kind of weirdly fit in. I just had Nicole Panter on, and she talked about how they were kind of like weird tangentially connected to the LA punk scene just through, some of the people they knew and some of the people in San Francisco they were connected to. So like it's almost like punk is a place for all the people that don't fit in anywhere else. Like,
Yeah, and it was a lot of art. A lot of art is involved in it, in this whole thing, and it's a lot of influence of Dada.
mhm.
You know, and so it's sort of, I think that, like, look at the Pistols covers, look at Jamie Reed's stuff. It's just totally Dada in it. The lettering and everything, and the sort of collage, pasted stuff together, and
Yeah, no, 100%. And it's also like it gives people like, yourselves permission. I don't know, like, well, I don't mean to put words in your mouth when I say this, but like permission to do music and take music to completely different places. Like it feels like the art meets the street, like it's Dr. Feelgood meets Dada, and out of it comes the sort of musical explosion that we're still dealing with. Like, like obviously I do a podcast all about it, but I really do see it everywhere. Like the influence is still being felt, the reverberations.
oh yeah, it's crazy. Like, like we're getting on to be punk pensioners.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, but I still feel the same. Like, it's like I'm interested in stuff that, that started then.
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't know, it's kind of weird, isn't it? The way it's still with you.
Yeah, absolutely. What about Zoo Records? Like, how did that relationship come about? Because it's like the people from Big in Japan that started, or the Big in Japan's the first record they put out, right?
Yeah, well, it was Bill and Dave Balfe. Well, it was really Bill first, and then Dave Balfe sort of wanted to do it with him, so he sort of got involved. And yeah, they put Big in Japan out, but they sort of broke up. It was kind of put out after Big in Japan had packed in. Weird. And there was just a Liverpool label, and it was kind of cool. Wow, Liverpool's got this label, Zoo Records, So I was buying it all, even if I didn't like the records or not, because it was kind of, you felt like sort of loyal
Yeah.
to it, And then Teardrops, they were our friends from Eric's, and they got a deal with them. And Julian said to Bill, "Why don't you get our mates on? The Bunnymen, that band that that supported us, because our first gig was just supporting Teardrops. We did one song, and it was basically Les joined on the Saturday. He bought a bass on the Sunday, and the gig was on the Wednesday. I think we rehearsed on the Monday or the Tuesday. Only me and Les. Mac never turned up, by the way. So, so like I'd forgotten that, but I was speaking to Les about it, and he said, Mac never turned up. Don't you remember? We were just me and you in that basement. We went to this weird basement that when the tide came in, the water came in. It was like mud on the floor. It was so weird.
So you played literally in the Mersey.
Yeah, it was like when the Mersey came in, the water table went up and this basement flooded, and there was like little lumps of mud what we were standing on. And I like keeping out of the water, with our amps plugged into the mains and everything. It's like, well, what do we do? Well, we didn't really had one amp. Me and Les were both going through my amp that I'd bought off the catalogue. The sort of like HP, weekly payment kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it was everything was so quick, but I didn't think anything was going to happen, or didn't even sort of wish for anything to happen. No, it was just like, oh, this is cool. Let's do this,
Yeah.
We'll be a band, And then as things go, one thing leads to another, and it starts feeling like, wow, we are a band. It's us against the world, Mm-hmm. You kind of like, it's like it being in a gang or the Scouts or something, or some sort of army, against everybody. And everyone hated each other in them days. Everyone, they did, like, all the other bands were jealous of all the other bands, including us. So it was all a lot of jealousy and a lot of like, oh, there's that lad out there, man. They're shit, them, aren't they? That sort of thing. No, don't go down there. There's thingies down there. He's a knobhead. Part of that in Liverpool. Liverpool's a very bitchy place. We're as guilty as anybody else, if not worse.
You almost need that, though, as a young band, as like a self-defense thing to prevent, like to help you build up the resilience to make it. You need to hate those other bands to, I don't know, just to spurn yourself on in a weird way.
I liked all the Manchester bands. Like my sort of nickname was Manchester for a bit, but I don't remember anybody saying it to me. But Paul Simpson, my mate, he always says, your nickname was Manchester because you dressed like you were from Manchester. Like, 30 miles away. So, it's like I was guessing like they did 30 miles away. So it was like some sort of weird tribe or something. It's crazy. It's like, but we were into the Fall. The Fall were our band. We all loved the Fall, and Joy Division, obviously, when they appeared, certain ratio. Yeah, not so much from the Dogs.
Well, it's interesting because
Dogs, though, love them.
Oh, incredible band, incredible band. Like it's interesting though, like how you bring up all those factory bands and how canonized that scene is, but like you look at the Zoo Records run and it's nothing to slouch at. There's like incredible talent there that label's discovering, and it just seems like it's never really celebrated in the same way that Creation and of course Factory are, because like even those Naughty Lumps Iggy Pop's Jacket single, that's a classic.
Yeah. Bill Drum played the solo on that.
That's really
that's
awesome. That is amazing. I love that single so much. And you wind up doing a band with Bobby Carr, right?
Bobby Carr
from the Surreal Estate.
Oh yeah. I helped him do some producing. That's all.
Oh, yeah. I love that that first 12-inch. I think you play some guitar on it too.
Yeah, it was just like he was doing it. And he said, "Come and help us." And I think it might have been me and Les, or a couple of us went to help just because we knew him. He's a nice lad.
It feels like by that point, it does, like, at least from the outside, look like it was kind of a scene of bands. Like it feels like that competition had kind of died off by that point.
Yeah, there was a few bands that we got on with. Okay. Can't quite think of any at the minute. No, we just think they were all shit.
Was there that kind of competition with Manchester? Like you mentioned, they gave you that nickname, and it is so close.
Yeah, there was a sort of competition, but we respected the Manchester bands. We liked them, for some reason we got on with them and we liked them, and the Fall were sort of almost mates.
Mm-hmm.
Like Mac was sort of mates with Mark E. Smith, I think, until they started having a go at each other in the press. I think once we started to get more famous than them, or whatever, or bigger than them, whatever you want to call it, they kind of fell out. Yeah, we were more of a tension than they were, and he started they started slagging each other off or something like that.
He definitely was, a notoriously curmudgeonly fellow as well. So I think that might have been
Marquis.
Yeah, in my experience,
He's funny. That's funny. He's a bloke.
We were supposed to do a tour with him one time, and all the experiences dealing with him to the run of the tour. Suffice to say, the tour never happened, but it was like I felt like I was getting sort of the legendary experience of dealing with Mark. Rest in peace, obviously, as well, with all due respect to him. But it was definitely a.
We did a couple of sports for him and stuff like that. We used to go to Manchester to see him in the bunny van.
What was it like when you guys started traveling? Like, obviously, outside of you in Manchester, like when you started playing out other shows, were there other scenes kind of happening that were going towards, as the more post-punk stuff at that time?
Yeah, we it was like a Sheffield thing going on, which was more like electronic world, with Human League and Cabaret Voltaire, that sort of stuff. Yeah, but it's great travel. Like traveling's the best thing that's happened about being in the band. I think, there was no chance I was going to go around the world. I was a trainee chef flipping burgers.
Yeah. No, I was thinking about that today. Like just the opportunities that bands afford people, like to go place and experience those cultures in a way you would never get to experience, even as a tourist.
Yeah, it was like being in the army. You travel around, but the only good thing is you don't have to kill anyone.
Yeah, that's the great thing about
it. Always an advantage.
What was it like when you started going to Europe? Early on, like when did you start going to Europe? Was it before the first LP?
Yeah, I think it was. We were sort of became like flavor of the month, and we were like the new hip kids on the block, with this drum machine and everything. It was kind of, a cool kind of thing. We were sort of seen as like these cool dudes, and we were like a bit, obnoxious and mardy, So it was kind of. There was these hipsters in Belgium. And I think they were all like sort of diplomats' kids or something. They all seem to have loads of money.
Yeah.
And I've never been anywhere. I'd been to Wales for 3 days. That was it. It's only 50 miles away. They put on these gigs at this place called the Plan K. Joy Division had been there the week before. And I think Certain Ratio. And we were like, getting in the papers all the time and all that. The Enemy and the Melody Maker and the Sounds and that. And we had this single out, which was, single of the week and everything, which was crazy, but it was just so different to everything else. I think people just thought, well, that's different, which was pictures on my wall. And so we got asked to do this gig in Belgium. So we just went over there, and it was a real eye opener. I've never been anywhere, like I say. It was a brilliant place. It was in a disused sugar refinery.
That's awesome. Those shows are so legendary too, because as you mentioned, there's just a run of like sort of incredible bands, and they're getting them so early. Like, you guys are just obviously that single is it's a legendary single and extremely popular at that point, but still like the fact they're booking yourselves and Joy Division, A Certain Ratio, and there's a couple other bands I think they booked too, maybe another two, I don't know exactly, but it just feels like these diplomats with a lot of money had a great ear for the bands that would become sort of important years later.
Yeah, well, they were hipsters. They were watching the scenes and they liked that sort of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
They were sound. We were like, it was you remember at the time the pubs over here shut at 10:30. I think it was 11 o'clock at the weekends. So that was it then. Clubs could stay up until 2, but everywhere just shut. It was rubbish. Everything was shut on a Sunday.
Yeah.
No shops open on a Sunday. Half day Wednesday, everything was shut.
Yeah.
For some reason. It's like it goes back to some sort of weird 15th century thing or something, I think the pub's closing goes back to the First World War. They didn't want everybody getting smashed up, when there was a war on.
Yeah.
But then when we went to Belgium, to Brussels, we didn't go out till 12 o'clock at night. We're all knackered and that, so we didn't know what the hell was going on. Like, we'll all meet at 11 in this bar called the Falstaff, which is this dead ornate, amazing, like, old school Belgian bar, right by the Bourse and the Grand Place, which is like this dead fucking brilliant medieval square. And it was, couldn't believe it, couldn't believe it. And us and Teardrop Explodes went over and we did like a double, a sort of, we supported them, I think, And then we went over on our own and did it when Pete joined. So.
Yeah. What was it like going to America for the first time?
I didn't like it at first. It was everybody seemed to be too fake.
Yeah.
Not like it all just seemed like a bit like, oh. And the record company people were getting on my nerves. They were all like, Archie Putkin or whatever it is on Spinal Tap. We were all just like him. What's his name?
I know exactly the character. I'm trying to remember. Who plays him too? Is it not Bruno Kirby? It's someone. I can't remember who plays him now.
It was all that, oh, by the way, which one's pink? That sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Who's Echo? All that. And that's why we invented that story that the drum machine was Echo. Because everybody was starting to think Mac was Echo. Like we didn't want to be Huey Lewis in the News.
Yeah.
Even he didn't like it either, he didn't want to be called Echo or whatever.
Well, it's good. It's good you can nip that sort of lead singer ego right off the bat. That's the move.
Yeah, well, what do you think?
What was it like working with Sire and being on Sire? Because once again, Seymour Stein, like from Madonna to the Ramones, yourselves to Radio Birdman, like he was signing a lot of really cool stuff. Talking Heads, yeah, of course.
Well, Sire was my dream label to be on,
Yeah.
I loved all them bands. And and he just came to see. We did a thing at the YMCA in London. I'm giving all my book away here. In the Bunnyman book.
Well, believe me, I will plug your book, and when the book does come out, I will read the book, and I want to fill in the margins a little bit. That's my favorite thing to do is when someone puts out a book, and then I get even more nerdy stuff to go into. Because believe me, we have barely scratched the surface, and there's
so much I haven't put in it that I've remembered since I've finished it. It's like, oh, what did I say about that? What about that? And that weird party where that bloke turned up in a bloody frogman outfit and all kinds of crazy stuff, where when I remember we were at this lad called Fat Eddie's house one night, and everyone was out of it, completely more on beer and whiskey or whatever than anything else. And he fucking put his foot through the telly, his own telly. It's just nuts.
Oh, that's amazing.
Now, Eddie, what are you doing?
Well, as I say, this has been incredible, Will. And anytime you want to come back on this show, please know you're always welcome. And when the book comes out, especially, I'd love to have you back on to talk about.
Yes, it's on like Third Man Books, which I was really chuffed about. In America, I went to the the press implant in Detroit.
Mm-hmm. I haven't been yet. I want to go so badly.
It was really cool. Yeah, I got like the little guided tour and everything. Yeah.
Dave Buick from Third Man was just on the show a couple weeks ago, and
all that on your list, yeah.
Yeah, and Ben Blackwell's been on the show before. Like talk about a label that just was like, like what I would do if I ever had Jack White money. That would be my fantasy. Is just like, like you're sitting in front of a wall of records yourself. So I think you're probably the same way. But I would just want to build out this like record kingdom.
Yeah, well, I love the fact that they're pressing vinyl, and they're really busy. They even press vinyl for Motown, I think.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, no, it's one of the big plants now.
It's brilliant. That is what a forward-thinking kind of genius that thought that was. I know. Well, I've got this money. I'll make a fucking record pressing plant because they're all closing down and there's a demand. It's great.
Yeah, and it also just shows like the fact that they're doing like a publishing thing and doing your book now, like the fact it's just people that love music and just want to share that love of music. Like I don't want this to sound like Third Man propaganda, but like I don't know, it's just something I've really noticed in my experiences with the people there and the stuff that they put out. Like it's like, oh, you're doing this because you love it.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Obviously Jack White is a massive music head and he loves it. And he loves records and guitars and all the rest of it, So, I've never met him, but he seems like a nice chap.
I met him one time when we played there, and he came out in Nashville, and he came out and he was wearing like sort of a tight fitting black shirt. And that's when I realized he is ripped. He looks like a pro wrestler. He is so jacked.
I know he batter some lad out of a band one time or something.
Yeah, there was definitely an incident where after I saw him in person, I was like, oh yeah, no, no one messed with that dude. He is definitely, he looks like he could have been wrestling in Blackpool back in the day or something.
Yeah.
One thing I did want to talk to you about before you go quickly is you do work with the Chameleons on the first single. And then, of course, later on, the Chameleons, KLF, you wind up doing stuff with KLF. I'm just wondering what that relationship was like and how did that come about in the very beginning?
Well, yeah, like obviously, that the Chameleons is not the band, the Chameleons.
Yes, yeah, of course.
Bill and Dave Balfe, from Zoo Records.
But they did a Laurie and the Chameleons record at some point too, right?
Yeah, I played on one of their things on the B side of one of them.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. You just used to do it just because it's all mates,
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that was their sort of attempt to try to do some sort of pop thing. But, they were just our managers, Bill and Dave were managers, and like on that first LP, Ian Brody produced a couple of them as well. From Lightning Seeds, and he was in another band called The Original Mirrors.
Amazing. Yeah, I know definitely know the Lightning Seeds, of course.
Yeah, but it was they seemed to know a little bit more than we knew. But to be fair, it was mainly Hugh Jones, our engineer, that really knew what to do. They were more vibe merchants, Dave and Bill. And Dave was always trying to get it more poppy. I was trying to get it more weird. And, remember Mac had Dave Balfe by the throat at one point. It was a bit mental. And then the second LP, Hugh Jones produced it, I think, didn't he?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was obvious that he knew more than what they knew. So we're all kids. What do we know about producing a record? Nothing. And it always used to freak me out because Ian Brody, when we started working with Ian Brody, we did Rescue and Pride, just 2 songs, and he knew what all the equipment did in the studio. And he was like younger than me. I was 20 or something. He's like, how do you know all this? And he said, I don't know, just sort of know it. He knew what a compressor does and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, it's that thing where it's just like, I think it's because people didn't necessarily know what they were doing at times, though. That's why it's so brilliant, the stuff that people came up with. Like you're talking about the experiments that you're doing just based out of, trying to figure it out and then look at the sound you invent.
Yeah, but Ian did know what he was doing, though. He knew, like when that lead guitar thing on Rescue,
mm-hmm.
They did this thing where they slowed the tape down a touch, like a little minuscule amount, and then I did the guitar thing again, and then when it was played back, it had that weird chorusy, which I've been trying to get ever since, and obviously you can't get it because you can't have a tape slowed down live, like do it twice and then just hang on a minute while I rewind the tape and play that again. You could probably do it sampling it, but it's a bit naff that.
Yeah, it's not the same.
It was an approximation of everything,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been incredible. And as I say, anytime you want to come on and talk more music, please know the door is always open.
Thank you. It's been good. I've enjoyed it. It's been really good. There's nothing better than talking about music.
Thank you, Will, for coming on the show. And you heard right there, Will be back at some point in the very near future because his book, Bunnymen, is out very soon on Little Brown out of the UK. And pick that book up. You heard right there. This thing will be a doozy, and I can't wait to read it and then have Will back to talk more. That was such a fun conversation. You never know how it's going to go with someone until you sit down and talk to him. But, man, that was a lot of fun. Speaking of a lot of fun, we're going to keep the literary theme going here on Turn Out a Punk with our next episode coming out in actually just a few short days is Theo Kogan from the band The Lunatics. They have a brand new book called Fallopian Rhapsody that is out now. You should pick this thing up. It is an incredible read. So I read that thing. Theo came on the show, and it is a super fun conversation. Oh my gosh. I was excited. Lauren was excited. My long-suffering partner was very excited about this one. Our kids were excited because we listened to the Lunatics in the house. It was a real moment of excitement in our family. And it'll be an exciting thing for you to listen to in a few short days. All right, that's it. Remember, as always, Black Lives Matter. The lives of Indigenous people matter. We need to protect trans kids. We need to help trans people protect themselves. And we need to stop hate and violence towards Asian people. There's a lot. There's a lot that needs to be done. But none of these things are political issues. These are just basic human rights issues. So get informed, get involved, donate money to organizations you believe in that are doing good work. We need to just stop fascism is basically the end of it. This is what this thing has all been, right? Like, who wants the Nazis? No one likes the Nazis. There's millions of punk songs about it. Like, there's so many punk songs, and this is fascism. Oppressing people because of who they are for tons of different reasons, obviously, but like whatever the reason, they're all bullshit. Oppressing people for who they are is fascism. So, yeah, go out and get informed. What else would I like to say? Do something creative for yourself. Make a zine. Start a podcast. Tony Erba said one time to me, "Make your own culture." I didn't say it to me. He said it on stage, but I felt like he was speaking right to me when he said it. Go there and make your own culture. Start a band. Start a fanzine. Do whatever it takes. Just make something, and that's really what we're trying to do, right? You don't have to make a podcast. You could. It's easy. But you could also make a band, a zine, as I mentioned, a record label. Just draw a picture. You don't have to share it with anyone either. You just draw a picture for yourself. Just do something creative. It can help your mental health. And speaking of helping mental health, I find meditation really does help me. And I didn't believe in it at all, and now I do. And so maybe it'll work for you too. Who knows? Maybe it won't. But what the fuck? Try it. Sign your organ donor cards, because by the time they come looking for those organs, you don't need them. You don't need them at all. Just get that shit out of you, you would say, if you were alive. But you're dead, so that's really why you don't need them. That's it. Stay safe, and I will see you on the next episode. Thanks for listening. Listen to Oil and Flowers with Buddha Blaze and myself. Bye.